did you decide who was going to do what in the business?
Yeah, when I first started my business, it was just me. I had to start it because I lost my job. I was in that area for 20-some years. I always had the idea of doing it, but I never took that leap of faith because they were paying me too much and benefits and all that sort of thing. So when they, let me go, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I basically did it myself for a long time. My whole plan was to make enough money to pay my bills, and then as things grew, I started trickling in the kids, so they didn't come in right away. So I set up a warehouse in Shelby, Ohio, and my oldest son started running that for me. And so he had his own company, a construction company, but back in that time there wasn't a whole lot of construction going on. So it was easy for him to come work for me because he needed to work also. And then as I grew, I got my daughter involved on a part-time basis, and then as we grew, she became full-time, and then, it kind of snowballed from there. So it wasn't really something that was like a big master plan. It just kind of happened as we grew incrementally. I just kind of added bodies, and and I had kids to do it, so that was kind of nice. Because it is hard to find good employees, but if the whole plan is to eventually turn everything over to them, so they do have some skin in the game where they know that it's not like some employee just I'll get paid for a while, then I'll just go do something else. So they know that eventually they'll be doing this, so they better do it right, and that does help quite a bit. So here's Barb.
My husband always wanted to get into some kind of a business. He is a retired fireman. He's a retired nurse as of last year. He also was the EMS coordinator over at Elyria Memorial Hospital. So he's worn many hats, and he's had the opportunity as a fire marshal and so forth to walk into a lot of businesses. And he would always come home and say, we should start this and we should start that. And he was always in front of the thing, and then like a month or two later, we see what he was talking about opening up, and he'd go, I lost my opportunity. But I wasn't real keen myself on going on this venture. I also was a nurse and working, but he came to me one day and he said, I want to take you down to Medina, and we went into a Jimmy John's store, and the sandwiches were just terrific. The place was absolutely immaculate, and that's what I liked. The bathrooms were so clean. I said I wouldn't have a problem with any of my family members or friends coming to a place if we keep it as nice as this one is. And so we kind of started to look into that venture. Now, we had some other side benefits out of all of this. I have my son, who's the operating manager, had been working for multiple restaurants throughout his career with a lot of promises, and about the best that he ever made it in is as an assistant manager. So when they get to a certain ceiling, you usually aren't able to make that move into an owner-operator type thing. He worked for Carrabba's, he worked for Chili's. So my husband said, this is a perfect opportunity to give our son a job, and hopefully as time would go on, he would move in and take over the businesses. And so I said, yes, I thought that was great. Plus, my daughter over here also works for us at the store. For my daughter, this is going to be a legacy for her, where we've developed a trust, and in order to ensure that she will be taken care of as time goes on. And then my daughter-in-law came into the business, and she had also worked in restaurants. That's where she had met my son. And so now we have all 5 of us in the business, and it really is a nice working relationship.
So I think a lot of people would think that there's challenges. For some people, it's challenging to work with your family. Like, I love my husband, and there's certain things we do really well together, and I could never work with him because one of us would kill the other one, and then our kids would, be orphans. So you have to think about things like that before you decide to do things like that. But so did you know that it would work? Like, do you know, or was it really a leap of faith where you said, okay, we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we'll, make some other arrangements or something? Or was it just that, did you just have that feeling that, we have that understanding or, good job definition?
Okay, as I was bringing my kids into the business, it became apparent they either liked it or they didn't. I have a son who's an art teacher at a high school. He wouldn't mind it, but he likes what he's doing, so that's fine. But they all started part-time, so they got a taste for it, and they could either like it or not like it. I don't force them to be there, and they all really took to it and liked it so far. Now, I've made a couple changes. My second oldest son does something for me. He started out doing something else, and he didn't really like that, so I moved him into, a different area, which when you have a couple businesses there, it's easy to do. So that worked out good. But I want them to like what they're doing, because it's important to have a passion for what you do, because you don't want to sit there and think, oh, I have to go to work today and hate that, So as long as they have that and they have the incentive to keep doing what they're doing, and then they know at the end of the day when I decide to quit or retire or die, whatever, then they hate when I say that. But probably deep down inside they're like, yeah, I know. but then I want them to carry it on, and that can be their job, and and it does good for them. So I guess for me it was, of course I know my kids, so I know they're not totally inept. There's some things I wonder why they made that choice, but but I knew they could handle what we do, but I was doing it for 20 some years. They can't have that kind of knowledge, so I kind of have to just slowly introduce them to little by little by little, and it's worked out real well. So.
Well, I guess my husband and I have been married for 43 years, so I guess that's a success in itself. I think he's just like my perfect match. We don't have arguments very often, so I think that's probably a good thing. And my husband had the fortitude to say that I was going to be the 51% owner of the business. We gave my son 5% without having to put any capital in. It was because of his expertise. And as the end result is, if we're sitting around the table having a management decision that has to be made, I think we're all pretty open into listening to both sides. But when it comes down to the two boys can't make up their mind, my husband just turns to me and goes, "And what does the president say?" And so far, whatever way I swung, and sometimes I've swung on the son's side, sometimes I've gone on the husband's side. There's been no qualms or arguments about it. But we had that serious conversation before getting into it. We said we didn't want to get into the business and have it be something that would break the family up, because we already had a wonderful relationship. And we all agreed that the family came first, and as long as it didn't have that effect, we would stick through it. So we've been in it for 5 years, and we're hoping my son will make the business grow after we get out of it. And so far we don't know when we're leaving, but I would imagine we'll probably be in it for another 5 to 10 years, and then hopefully he'll take it over.
That's so great. So, and I'm so glad to hear that you had the conversation before you even got into it. Like, your situation's a little different because it was all you, and then as your kids came in, but you still made that decision that we're going to have them work part-time, see if they like it. If they like it, they can stay. If they don't, they can go. There's not any of that weird expectation stuff going on. And for me, that's always the challenge. Like, people go into business together, even people who aren't family go into business together without having that understanding or having those conversations before they start. And then when things get a little uncomfortable, they have no mechanism for resolution, for resolving things. It sounds like you guys have a good communication system. You've made decisions about how decisions are going to be made. That was going to be one of my questions, but you've got that figured out. And the other thing I think that is so tricky, I will say, is maintaining that family relationship. Does the business relationship start when you walk in the morning and stop when you leave at night? or is it all, do they blend over onto each other? And what do you do to safeguard against it being all business all the time and not having that relationship that for 43 years you've been building? So.
Well, with me, my kids are older, so none of us live together, so that makes it kind of easy. But I think as an employer, it's harder to discipline and find fault with your kid than it is with an employee.
Yeah.
And your kids know all your deepest, darkest secrets. They know how you think. I mean, you've lived with them your whole life, so it's a little more difficult to sit there and say, that's a dumb idea. We're not doing it that way, And I've had to do that, but a lot of times I will just let their idea play out, then they realize it's pretty stupid. So, and we're fortunate enough to have a good enough cash flow for that doesn't hurt, So if, oh, you see why that wasn't a good idea, or but then again, having a lot of kids involved, I can go to the other two and say, what do you think of this, and then we can gang up on the other one. So, so not intentionally, but I mean, it does work, because eventually they're, I'm the one that makes the decisions, but they're the ones who are going to make the decisions, so they have to start making some now, and they're going to have to get along with each other, because, I can see that in the future, different personalities, some of them are me, mine, and some of them are, what do you want to do, so I can see that having an effect in the future, so I'm trying to avoid that problem if I can, but it's hard to say that that's ever going to work.
I guess we kind of ironed everything out before we got into the business, and my son is truly the operations manager, so he's the one who takes the blunt of all the phone calls from the stores in regards to issues that are coming up or have come up, and they need immediate answers. My husband and I usually go for long car rides. And in the car is usually when we have some really good discussions about the store and where we want it to go and what our plans are, or if we're having difficulty with our son, how are we going to deal with that? And I think there's a real advantage to getting into a franchise, especially the Jimmy John's franchise, because there are so many specific rules and regulations, and if we're doing a good job, we have a coach that comes in from corporate every month, and he just comes in, and his job is strictly to make sure the store is immaculate, to make sure that we're following the procedures. They have these long, massive checklists throughout the whole entire day where they say they did all these different tasks. So for my son, that makes his job a little easier, and definitely for me, I've never worked in a restaurant. It makes me feel confident that those things are being done to the standard that I would want them to have them done. And so we really don't have too many disagreements. I think the biggest pain just comes over when his staff has not earned enough to get the bonus, because we bonus people. And my son thinks as a employee rather than as an owner, and he pleads the case for his staff to get their bonus. Sometimes he can convince me, and sometimes I turn to his father and go, you're right, we're not doing it. But there's a lot of give and take on that kind of aspect of the job, but when it comes to the day-to-day operations, Timmy handles it all.
So it's really great to have that role definition, where everyone knows this is my area, and it's not like you're totally siloed in that and you don't know what each other is doing, but people have responsibility for their area, and someone else isn't standing over them and saying, don't do it that way. And it is a bit of a leap of faith, right? For any employee, but it is probably a little harder with family, with kids, because sometimes it's hard to let your kids just make their own mistakes, and then it's harder when they're doing it to your company, right? So you have that double whammy thing. But when you have role definition, and it was interesting when you said, it's good to buy a franchise because they have the rules. So it's not like they're your rules, right? You get to say, I'm sorry, but corporate said this is how we have to do this, so this is just how we have to do it, and it's not I'm making it, as opposed to you, right? Or you have to say, okay, I'm head chief and bottle washer, and this is what we're doing. So But you also said something that I think is also challenging for family businesses, in that when you look out and you see at some point those kids are going to be taking it over, what does that look like? And there's going to be some decisions that you're going to have to make that still keep the family talking to each other at Thanksgiving dinner, right?
Right, and I think in opening the different companies, the logistics company, the trucking company, I also set up a warehouse company, so I eventually want to have four actual revenue streams coming in is my goal, and then each one of them can be in charge of one of them. But there's a lot of legalities involved too with ownership, and if something happens to me, then who owns the company? I'm the sole owner, so it actually goes to my wife, who knows nothing about it. So that and it's their stepmom, so there's problems there. So not that they hate each other, but I mean it's just a little bit different. So I've got to get legally, I have to set it up right, which it isn't right now, and that's something I have to attend to. And I'll have that done before the end of the year here. But but as we grow, we have an annual meeting. We go down to the Mohican Lodge in January. We discuss how we did last year and then what we're going to do this year. And I even invite my son that's not in the business, and he brings his wife and kids, and they swim, and we go out and walk in the snow and that sort of thing. But it's good to sit down just for a couple hours and just kind of hash out with everybody there. Everybody has input, and I'm not a kind of guy that, well, it's my way or the highway. I want to hear everything because I don't have all the answers. So, and they come up with some ideas because eventually their ideas are going to come to fruition when they're running the company. So I can't turn those down. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're at there.
That's great. Do you want to weigh in on this?
I just wanted to say that my son, having come from a restaurant background, he, of course, came into the business, and he wanted to implement some of the things that his life experience had taught him, and they weren't necessarily the Jimmy John way. And so there, was some give and take where we said, well, we'll try out your way. We'll try out the Jimmy John way. We'll see which way works the best. And I would say we're down to about two things that Timmy brought into the program that aren't the Jimmy John way. The gentleman owned the business for 38 years, and he built it up to an enormous franchise. So obviously he's had a lot of experiences which worked for us. But sometimes it is a little hard sell with my son, but he usually comes around. In regards to the future, when we got into the Jimmy John's business, I had no idea how complicated running a business was, and how much work, and the fact that even though I don't work in the stores, I'm forever reading about taxes and how things the government keeps changing on us in regards to payroll. And I've come here to the FEBE meetings since I retired. My husband actually came like 6 months before I did. I have learned an awful lot at the FEBE meetings, and I have networked with a lot of people here, and some have mentored us, and it has been fabulous because I knew zero going in, and obviously we have moved in that direction of how are we going to take care of this business when we get out of it? What if something happened to us right away? We do have a will. I have 4 children. I only have my Amy and Tim in the business. The other 2 have their own careers. So we have made arrangements on how the business would be, if both of us go at the same time, how the business would then be open for my son. We've taken out an insurance policy so that he would have funds to be able to at least buy one of the stores outright. And in case his brothers, I doubt if they want to own a store, and give him that flexibility to at least stay in business, because at this moment in his life, he doesn't have the wherefore-all or the money to be able to do that, to buy out his brothers and sisters. So we kind of looked at that, And like I said, a trust for my daughter, because the ladies in my family live to be ancient, and I wasn't sure my retirement and my husband's retirement would carry over into her lifespan when she would need it. So obviously, we're just trying to think ahead.
So it's so important, and I'm really impressed with this because so many people don't, whether they're in family businesses or not. You know, you start, you hit the ground running, you're going, and you don't stop and think about all of those what ifs or the future. And, you know, one of the things that I say to my clients, especially the family business ones, is what if, God forbid, a million times you got hit by a bus? What happens, right? Are there people who know how to do what you do? Do they know, are they signers on the bank account? Can they, you know, do they know where the files are? Do they know who the vendors are? It's all that stuff that, you know, and especially all the stuff you have in your head. Could the business survive if you, and you didn't die, but you were in the hospital for, you know, even a couple of weeks can make a difference in a business. So it's not just passing on the knowledge. So, I mean, in your case, your son's got the knowledge, right? And so that's the good news there. But you've got all the knowledge in your business and passing it on to the family in a way that they can absorb it and still plan for the unexpected, be prepared for it, and then plan for the future to make sure, you know, if you want everyone in the business to be covered, I mean, everyone in the family to be covered by the business, how do you do that so everyone thinks that it's fair, you know? I mean, it's a weird thing that it's complicated when it's a family business, because if your kids weren't in the business and it was just you and your husband, it'd be easy. It would be a split and that'd be the end of it. And if no one wanted it, they'd sell it and split the, right. It becomes a different thing. And you've got kids who aren't in your business just like you do, you know, but a bunch who are. So, and the other interesting thing I thought about what you said was that if God forbid something happened to you, it would go to your wife who knows nothing about the business. Right?
She does want to work for me, and I told her no.
Yeah. See? We have to know who we can work with and who we can't. And I'll you know, I, many years ago, worked for a company that was owned by 3 people. A man and a woman who had worked together before, and the man's wife, who knew nothing about the business. And they did it because they wanted it to be female-owned. This was like back in the 80s. And he died tragically in a car accident, and they didn't have a buy-sell agreement, and all of a sudden his wife, who knew nothing about the business, was 67% owner of the business because she had his and hers, and the woman who knew the entire business was now the minority owner. And I mean, you know, the wife didn't know to the point where she thought the company was worth more than it was worth because she didn't understand the finances of it, right? It can be really detrimental to a company to not think these things through, you know, because we all think we're going to live forever, and we all know we're not going to live forever. You know, it's just this, it won't be today. Okay, you know. I know, exactly right. So I have one last question for you, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys to ask questions. And it is, has there ever been a situation where the business caused conflict in the family? And if so, how did you resolve it so that both were okay? And if not, then you're really lucky, and, you know, people should write books about you.
Probably the only conflict that we've had is when I started the trucking company. My oldest son thought it was a ridiculous idea because it's very expensive. It's very, you know, buying trucks and hiring drivers, and, you know, there's a lot of government involvement as far as dotting every I and crossing every T, and, you know, the drug testing around the whole bit that everything has to go with having employees that are drivers and the liability involved. But, you know, I basically just said, well, we're going to do this because it supports the core of our business, and I don't care if we don't make a dime on it or lose money on it. We need to do it to ensure that we keep what we got going here with the other business. And I did rally my other kids around that one at the time, and you know, he came around. You know, he said, well, I'll do it, but you're stupid. You know, one of those kind of things. So that worked out. But I guess that's the only problem we've had, because, again, we've grown really slow, and it's been very incremental, and we've managed the growth at each step. So that's kind of to me, that's the best way, so.
I wouldn't say we've had any major conflicts or problems that the business has caused. I would say probably the thing that's the most nerve-wracking for us is when we decide we're going to move into that next store. Are we really ready for that next store? We want to make sure we got a management team that can fill that store. To me, that's number one. Second is whether you've got the finances to do it. And then we spend a very long time, we're always constantly driving around on those long rides saying, well, this would be a good spot and that would be a good spot. And then we have to investigate whether it truly is a good spot. Because it costs $30,000 just to get the franchise, the Jimmy John's to agree that that's a franchise location that he would allow us to have. And then you have to look for a site, and then you have to negotiate your lease, and you have to buy all the equipment and do your build out and all that. And it, frankly, the first store 5 years ago, when we opened that one, it cost us about $310,000. The one across the street here on Sheffield 4 years later was almost $500,000. So we've got a great amount of money invested in the businesses. Fortunately, all the stores are in the black. That makes it more comfortable too.
Yeah,
Really?
Right. How could they not be? It's freaky fast. It is remarkable. I think I told you guys this story, but at my house, when I order, my husband tells me I have to tell him exactly when I hit the button because he times the driver. We live in Lakewood. And he times the driver, and we're always amazed how quickly the guy shows up at our door. So, thank you.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Sure.
Over at one of the hospitals that we deliver to, they actually in the emergency room say, oh, we're going to have and Amy does the delivery. UH. I wasn't going to announce the hospital, but all right. They decide they're going to order sandwiches, so they let the staff all know, and everybody places their order. And then in addition to placing their order, they all pick a 15-minute increment. I mean, not 15-minute, 15-second increment as to when the Jimmy John driver is going to show up. Yeah, a little pool, and then the one who's the closest or wins it gets a free sandwich. So they have a lot of fun with it, and Amy makes somebody happy when she makes the delivery.
That's so great. You think you could do something with that from a marketing perspective? That'd be really, you could get everybody playing the game. That'd be great. And now we'll do that in my house. So thank you. Those were the questions that I had. I do want to open it up to you guys to see. I'm going to bring the microphone to you.
Thank you. Both of you indicated that you have basically planned your estate as to what's going to happen afterwards. But putting the estate planning process apart, in your planning that you've had on, Jim, on an annual basis in January and Barb from time to time, have you come up with actual plans for the business itself as to what you're going to do, say, for the next 12 months? And do you put it in writing? And then do you measure it the next year as to what all you have accomplished?
Wait. Who wants to go first?
As owners, we have a monthly owners meeting. And then usually a couple days later, we follow it up with a manager's meeting. So we get everything ironed out so that we can discuss those things in the manager's meeting and that we have a unified front. In regards to the planning, we discuss it on a monthly basis, especially if we think we're getting closer to the point where we want to start finding a site. My son is very involved in that, in his vote as to where it's going to go, and we have it all planned out ahead of time, and we keep each other posted. And if anybody goes for a ride and finds something, then of course they share it, and we go take a look at it.
Before you leave, you put it down in writing?
Yes, because we do meeting notes from the owners' meeting. We make sure that anything that each individual committed to do, that by the next meeting we expect it to be done. We follow up on that, and then go over old business and then start new business again.
Okay. Well, what we do is when we have our January meeting, we sit down and we look at each section of the business, the revenue each one's producing, and then we make our goals for what we want to do for the next year, and it is in writing. And then we share, that's the ideas we share, how are we going to go about doing this? And basically you've got a small pool of assets that you're going to throw at these ideas to help them, whether it's hiring a salesperson or buying another truck or whatever it is, and then we kind of decide how we're going to go about doing that. It's probably not as crisp as it should be. Again, maybe it's because it's family, and this guy says, well, I'm going to have this business later. Let's buy some more trucks, So, we have to grow each business. The logistics side is definitely the biggest part of our business, and it's kind of lopsided to one side, but it's the easiest side to grow too. So it makes it tougher to allocate funds for the other businesses when, boy, I can grow this. We had an 82% growth last year, and this year we're sitting at like 10%. So it's like go figure. So but. So that was kind of disappointing, but it's still, it's still working. And the nice thing is we have no debt as opposed to your debt. I mean, everything that we have is paid for. So, and we bought our truck, we paid cash for it, and we were able to do the things that we're doing. And so, kind of want to keep it that way if we can. A lot of our employees work out of their homes. The only office we have is here in this building. So, and then we have a warehouse in Shelby, Ohio, but and there's an office there. But my kids work out of their homes, and the one works at the warehouse. But I got a daughter in Columbus that works for us full time, and my son lives in Shelby, but he works out of his home, and my other son comes in here with me, and we work out of here. So, I think probably the strategic planning side of it, putting them more down in writing and then review them more often would probably be a better thing. We probably don't do that as much as we should. So that's probably a good point.
Do you mind if I add on to that?
Oh, sure.
One of the things that Jimmy John's does is that we don't work with 12 months in a year. We work with what is called 13 periods. So it's on a 4-week schedule. Every 4 weeks is a period. And we do get financials for every period. So that kind of makes it nice to have a snapshot where you can kind of go and take a look at where your finances are at that point. Because even though you look at your checking account and say, well, I have this amount of money in the bank, that isn't necessarily the money amount that you have to work with. You have to be able to look at those P&Ls. And I did not know anything about that when I started into this. Again, I'll be a FEBE person for the rest of my life. They are the ones who helped me learn how to read them, how to use them. I did get some help from Jimmy John's, but their end of it isn't so much that part of it. They're more into the operations end of it and getting their royalty out of it. Again, if you're going to get into this type of a business, use the service here.
So thank you, Lee, for asking the question. It's so critical, and both of you for your responses. Getting into the habit of doing real specific strategic planning as quickly as possible is one of the best things you can do for your business. It's not the kind of thing. A lot of people start businesses, they don't do it, and you can always do it at any point, but if you can do it, the sooner you do it, the better, because you get in the habit of doing it. And it's so great to hear that they do periods. I always, when I do sales training, I always say, you have to monitor on a 30-day cycle, because you want to be able to see what went right and what went wrong as quickly as possible so that you can adjust, right? So this year it's hitting on 10%. if we're looking at it on a monthly basis, sometimes you can track what's actually happening and then make adjustments for it. And the other thing you said that was so interesting was it's so easy to put the money in the area that's making money, that's really good, and not in the other areas. Doing that strategic planning helps with that. If you say, okay, well, but we really do want to grow this one, if it's possible, right? You have to say, what's the market trend? How much could I actually increase that? And then really set up a course of action toward it, and then you monitor that course of action so you can see how it's really going. So I guess what I would say is it's never too late to start doing really specific structured strategic planning and monitoring that plan on a regular basis. Because the sooner you do it and get in the habit of doing it, the easier it is to do, and the end results are different. I mean, they just, it just weighs out differently. So, yes, Elizabeth.
Sir, I think I'd like to ask you to just address, if you could just talk a little bit about the transition from employee to business owner and then to employer.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Okay, as an employee, I was a terminal manager for UPS Freight. Before it was UPS Freight, it was overnight transportation, and UPS bought them. And I always had the idea that I wanted to have my own business, because as I was reviewing the P&Ls from the company, there were a lot of our customers, guys that I knew, very well, that we were really kind of hosing. We were really making a huge profit off of them. And I just thought to myself, if I could go to them and I could save them a lot of money if they just turned their shipments over to me. But I never did that. But when UPS bought overnight and started kicking out all the overnight people, me, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. That happened on April 15th. And by May 1st, I was incorporated. And by May 26th, I had my first check. So the day they came in and said, hey, you're done, I called all the customers that I had already had this in my head, and I just called them all and said, I know I could save you a lot of money if you just give me, made these appointments, went, sat down with these people, and boom, 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 it just kind of started. So, and again, at this point, I had 5 houses. I had, kids dead out the yin yang, and now I didn't have a job, and so it was terrible. It was very, I had to make money, so I really worked hard getting with my customers. Business grew like crazy, fast, and then it started getting to the point where I couldn't grow it anymore, and I was basically stuck in my house all day long, just doing reports and taking care of my customers. I couldn't really go out and find more, so I tried different strategies, and it just was going too slow. So I finally got with my son. I said, I need some help here. And at that time, he had his own construction business. He had basically fallen and broke his ankle to the point where they had to put screws and plates and all that stuff in it. So he wasn't able to do any work at that time. So he was the first one, hey, you can help me out here. So he kind of helped me out, and then I was able to get out more, and he was doing some of the things that I was doing in the office, so to speak. So it just kind of kept growing and kept growing. I never really thought about a family business at that time until it just kept growing and growing and growing. My whole, no longer just trying to make enough money to pay my bills. Now, I'm making more money than I need, and boy, I can really turn this into something. So that's how it kind of went out. Now, I also have other employees. I have salespeople and stuff, and other guys that I knew that have been in the business a long time that I use as consultants, and I got with IT people, and I got with other people that aren't family members that I use, and I have warehouse guys. So I have W-2 employees and 1099 employees, but it's really grown and kind of taken a nice shape. But that's kind of how the transition went for me. So,
do you feel like when you were at overnight and then it was UPS, it sounds to me like you already understood business. You knew how to read a P&L. You were responsible for people, right? You were the manager. So, right, so you had people working for you anyway. So you had sort of been an employer, to some degree?
The sales end of it, so I worked a lot with the salespeople, so I knew all the customers. So, and then thinking that, boy, I could really do this job. I know, and basically I don't charge anybody anything for what I do. I just take a portion of what I save them. So in 2008, of course, the economy was terrible, and so my business was saving companies money, and companies were already letting employees go, so the people that were doing these jobs were short-staffed anyway, so I became an assistant to what they were doing and saved them money at the same time and just took part of what I saved them. So that's how I started my business. So it worked out. Yeah, it worked out really good. So.
See, sometimes when the economy stinks, it's really good. Yeah. For some people, right? Haven't you? Who else? Derek.
I'm glad that you mentioned that you have other employees that aren't family as well. Actually, this Saturday will be 1 year for me, for my business actually, so I'm pretty excited about that, thank you. And as I start to hire people, some are family and some won't be family, and I've worked for other people that were family businesses. We talked about conflicts that had arisen and how to take care of those conflicts within the family. Have you had conflicts outside of the family because of the family business?
No. Matter of fact, the one gentleman that I relied on a lot, he's got a lot more experience than I do in trucking, so he was kind of my go-to guy when I have a question, and I use him as a consultant. But he said, look, I'll throw my energy your way, but you got to realize that this is a family business. He had some concerns that something happens to me, then they don't know him from Adam, they're going to cut him out of the loop. Now, I basically told him, I said, I can tell them how important you are to the growth of this business, and basically they're in a position where they can maintain everything that's going on, but they're not in a position to grow the business because they don't know the sales end of it. So they're going to have to rely on salespeople, different contacts, networking, and whatnot, and that's what he brings. So that's what I told him. I know this guy, you don't know him from Adam. Okay, I'm paying him money, but you don't realize what he's doing for us. So. But I made it clear to him also that I'm not going to control that. I'm not going to put it in writing that you will get so much money if I die tomorrow. I mean, so he had to make that choice, and he made that choice. So, yeah, he's with me. So that worked out good. So, but I see what you're saying, because people and every one of my people I pay differently. Some people I give them a certain amount of money a week that goes against what their commissions are. Some people I just pay. I just sit down and what is it you want? How hard do you want to work? Now, I don't have full-time salespeople yet that are salaried with benefits and that sort of thing. So, and that's where I'm heading probably before the end of the year. And once I do that, that'll be a different animal. Now they've got to be monitored because now they're getting a salary. So now they've got to produce, and they have to have goals, and they have to reach the goals. And as you watch them on a daily basis, if they're not reaching those goals, you got to find out what's going on. And it'll also take more my time to work with them. So more of my kids are going to have to handle some of the other, things that I do, which they say I don't do anything with it, which is okay. That's the way it always is. But, so there's, rules to go. You know what I mean? So I don't know all the answers. I just, as things have gone on, hopefully it'll keep working.
We really haven't had anything outside that I would cause any terrific difficulties, but I think it's because before we get into it, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of investigation before we make the step. I would say probably the hardest thing with the business has been when we first started the business, we all said we won't hire any family. And that meant outside of my daughter and my son and daughter-in-law. But then my husband's the oldest of 12 kids, so he has lots of brothers and sisters with lots of children that want to have a job. So we had a couple of them come to us and ask us, even some of his sisters have come to us and asked if they could work for us. And we took on a couple of the nieces' nephews, but we made it very clear. We sat down with their parents before we hired them, and we said they will be treated like any other Jimmy John employee. If they don't come to work, they don't have a job. If they can't do the job, they won't have a job. And one niece lasted a couple weeks, and she just kind of faded into the woodwork. Apparently wasn't a job she liked. We had another one that we invested the training and everything, and she worked for us I'd say a month and a half, and went off to college, which we do that with a lot of our employees. They're all part-time, and some work for us for the summer and then go to college and come home on holidays and stuff and work for us. Well, she didn't come back at Christmas, and she didn't come back like for the Easter break. And then I thought, well, she'll probably come back for the summer break. And we didn't hear from her. And I'm not going to track anybody down to see if they want the job or not. And after about 3 weeks into the summer, we get a phone call from my brother-in-law who says, my daughter would like to come back to work for you. She tried another company, and it didn't work out. And I said, well, Jim, I don't need her. Because if we weren't first, and it was, again, just a fast food type of a thing, then
do it again.
Yeah, she'll do it again. So that's probably been the only negative with the family that we've experienced, but it had no problems with my sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws because they concurred and agreed with how things were going to be handled before we hired their child. And we were, clearly upfront with it, and unfortunately it didn't work out. They could have stayed with us, but it was their choice.
So what that sounds like to me, and one of the most valuable things to do, is to set the expectation. So you have to set it really clearly at the beginning, like you did, right? Where you sit them down and you say, here's the way this is going to go, and then you follow up with that expectation, and then everybody knows that's the way it is. And it's not personal, right? You're an employee.
I'll follow up real quick with that, because that's exactly where the issues that I had as an employee came in, where the expectations were set but not followed through on. And I saw through a lot of that, and I lost a lot of respect for the people that I was working for, and kind of just relationships went downhill from that anyway. So anyway, sorry.
I can see how relationships are broken. I was just curious how many employees you have, and then how many total, and then how many of those are family.
As you're counting in your head.
So there's five of us, my husband, myself, Timmy, his wife, and Amy, who are all in the business together. At the Sheffield store, since it's still growing and it's a smaller store, I have 15 employees. At the Avon store, which is really cranking out, I have about 32 employees. Lakewood, which is kind of an interesting thing, is it's mostly delivery there. So 60% of my sales are delivery. So I have to have a lot of employees there also. I have 38 employees there because we have so many delivery drivers.
That's all you see coming out of that building. It's sort of like ants, just because they're stores like down in this little thing, and all you see is these guys come out with this thing and then the thing they're gonna put on top of their car, right? And the bag or whatever it is there. Yeah, it's a great operation.
Well, I have, including myself, there's 6 family employees, and then I have 3 dock workers at Shelby, and I have 2 truck drivers, and I have 6 different salespeople. They're across the country. I got one in Chicago, one in Phoenix. I mean, they're different places, but they're all filling a specific role with what they want to get out of my business and I get out of their business, so it works out real well. And I got one guy, I've never even met him. I've talked to him a million times, but the guy out in Phoenix, I've never met him. So that's kind of strange. And then I've got the different groups of the accounting people, the tax people, the IT people. They don't work for me, but I pay them. So I guess they kind of do in a way, but different projects. So it's kind of hard to say. So a lot of it is they're not really employees, I guess, but they're part of the network. And as a smaller business, it's easier to start that way than to hire somebody to do your account books. And my son can do QuickBooks, and we can have somebody maybe pay taxes, but works out pretty good.
Yeah, that's great. This is our last question. Sorry. But, I want to respect everybody's time. I know. I do have to say, though, before I give you the microphone, that I worked for a family business, too. And what business owners don't realize, it's so great that you're doing things the way you are, because what business owners in family businesses don't realize is exactly what happens with the non-family members when they see that.
Rumor has it that there's an election coming up, and it's going to be less than 30 days that we'll have a new president, and I think it's safe to say that we don't know which way it's going. Let's assume that whoever gets in, that their administration comes up with some strong laws affecting small businesses and entrepreneurs. How are you going to handle that if it directly affects you? For example, if they raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
So, wait, I'd like to clarify. You're talking about significant rules that negatively impact small business. Okay, that's okay, but because some could be really good for them. Okay.
Well, frankly, if that particular one passed where it was that people were getting paid $15 an hour, I would have to go out of business. I wouldn't be able to survive it. People wouldn't come in and want to spend $30 to buy a sandwich. Unless they're paying $100 to go and eat somewhere else. But so it would impact my business very negatively. I have to say a lot of the current regulations have impacted my business negatively. This current one with the DOL, where if you are an exempt or a non-exempt employee, I had 3 managers at every store, and I had to go and sit down with every one of my managers and tell them that I'm still giving them the title of manager, but they're not going to be salaried any longer. I had to put them on an hourly wage because, and some of that is like self-esteem for them as their position in the job. And I had to explain to them that nothing else was going to change. I still held them in the same regard and hoped employees would hold them in the same regard. But that has had an impact on my business, because if they go over 40 hours, I now have to give them overtime. And it is very obvious that when you're a manager of a store and you have to take a phone call at home, I have to pay you when you take that phone call at home. So they have to log and track all that, and I have to make sure that they get paid appropriately.
The minimum wage, I pay my dock workers 15 or more an hour now, so that wouldn't affect me. But there's tax laws and there's other laws that could affect me, and especially with the trucking end of it, because there's so many rules and regulations coming out, and they're fighting over, electronic logs and hours of service and all these different things that affect the drivers, that they're not going to make the money they made before. So what's happening with truck drivers, they're all like switching companies and going over here, and this one's giving you a $1,000 signing bonus if you come work for me and whatnot. So I've already lost one guy to that, and so I'm going to have to do that anyway. But laws are constantly changing, and I know sometimes it takes a long time, but I think just the tax laws themselves and the payroll tax and everything else that hits you, you got to pay that's a lot of money. You don't think about it at the time. You think, oh, I'll pay this guy so much. It's not that. So again, it would affect my business. It's not going to put me out of business. But it would probably cut a chunk into my profits, because we have a lot of money left over, which is kind of nice. But again, probably, that's the money I use to help me grow and do things because I started an IRA for my employees. I pay 2% for them into an IRA, and I do some things, and employees, but I want to do for them to keep them, because I got some good ones, and how hard it is to find good employees. And I want guys to grow with us as we grow, and as we get other locations, kind of like you're talking about. You want to find a staff that could actually different store and run that store for you, or be a major part of the management of that store. I want to do the same thing with the warehousing, because I got one warehouse, I can open a bunch more, but who's going to staff them? You know, I just can't go into a town and just pick somebody. I don't know them from Adam, so I got to use my guys to do that. So it's important to make sure they're happy and that they feel like they're growing too, especially when they're doing a job like unloading and loading trucks that isn't really rewarding in itself. They have to feel like they're an important part of the cog of what we're doing. So
It's such a great question, because two totally different industries and different impact, right? The laws and regulations that are being made on a daily basis, regardless of who's in office at this point, have dramatic impact on small business, and in different ways. Not as much to reinvest in your business. That's a big deal, right? Of course, right. Exactly, and potentially out of business depending on what it is. So thanks. Those are, unfortunately, real life examples.
You don't watch your times with everybody. You can.
Oh yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah. Right.
So
exactly.
Really be mindful.
Yeah. So seriously, are there any other questions? I didn't really mean to do that. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us.